to see it again.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoy what you're doing and your history, and I want to get into that. And to begin, I want to ask you, 4 years ago, we were all trying to grapple with this pandemic and how we were getting out of it. How did you survive that time period and how did it change you?
I think it's a great question because I think we have, as a society, moved on so quickly and we tend to forget. And for me, it's a reminder of the fragility of life, both individually and collectively, and how quickly things can change. So,
Yeah.
as a writer, novels take years to write, for me at least. So, I have to ask myself, even if I have a book contract, will this actually come to bear? You just don't know. And is it worth it to do anyway? And for me, it's a yes because I enjoy writing. Um, so it has made me, it has made me look at life differently for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It didn't affect me that much personally because I had just stepped out of a long teaching career to write full time. So I was at home anyway. But I was starting a meditation class. I had just been completing a 2-year meditation teacher training program with Tara Brock and Jack Hornfield. Not really because I wanted to be a meditation teacher, but because I wanted to learn to meditate better. And so I was about to offer this course just as the pandemic started, and it was very intense. People were very on edge, understandably. And then from that, I ended up starting a meditation podcast, Heart Haven Meditations, which somehow really took off. So yeah, it's all changed my life quite a bit.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do right now in 2024. I want to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, let's say third graders. It's career day. And one of the curious kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Well, I'm a writer. I was a teacher for many years. I write full time now. So they might think of that as sitting in front of my desk all day, which is a big part of it, but it also involves walking, thinking, interfacing with others. I have various writing groups I'm part of. That's very important to the evolution of my work. Right now, I have a book coming out soon in September, so I'm doing a lot of interacting with my agent and my editor and not long ago, copy editors, proofreaders, cover designers. So books are actually quite a collective process. I don't think people realize that. So I would want to convey that to the kids, how collaborative it is.
So what did you want to be when you were in the third grade? Did you dream of being a writer?
No, I didn't really have a linear path. I'm not one of those people who always knew what I wanted to do. In third grade, I probably wanted to be a horse. But I think a non-linear path can really serve a writer because you
Yeah.
end up doing a lot of different things.
So what was the book for you growing up? The one that really opened up that world of maybe thinking you wanted to write one day or just read more that place? What led you there?
I vividly remember reading Black Beauty as a kid. I remember the chair I was sitting in. I remember not being able to get out of the chair because I was so absorbed. And I remember the moment, spoiler alert, when Ginger died in that. And I was so bereft. I actually fell out of the chair
Wow.
crying. And I was really angry at the author, at Anna Sewell. And I thought, if I am ever a writer, I will never do this. I will never kill off my beloved character, which, of course, sometimes that has to happen. And that is how you see characters become their truest selves when they're met with tragedy. So that was a very important book for me.
So take me back to where you were born and raised and how these seeds of loving literature and teaching and podcasting, how did all of these kind of begin for you and evolve into who you are today?
Well, I grew up on Long Island, and I always loved to read. I always loved nature. And I think it's just bit by bit and things accrued. My interests accrued. I always had artistic interest, visual arts. And then through the encouragement of teachers along the way, writing started to gel as a possibility for me. So it's been a slow burn, I would say.
So who's been a hero for you? Who's been somebody that's been an inspiration in all of these endeavors that you've had in your life?
There are so many answers I could give to that, but one that comes to mind right now is a teacher I had in college. He was a Jesuit, and he used to take a group of us students hiking once in a while up in the White Mountains. And it was a really extraordinary experience because we didn't talk very much. We just would be in the woods with him. He would stop once in a while and just listen to the breezes and the birds. And he was like a tuning fork, like just being in his presence taught me to listen in a new way. And I had grown up in the suburbs, so I hadn't really experienced deep wilderness like that. And that has really stayed with me. My reverence for nature has stayed with me all my life, and it's in my work. In this book that's coming out now, Dawnland, nature is like a character in the book. So I remain very grateful to him.
You know, it's interesting. I have a jazz radio show as well, and I love talking about the legends and kind of getting information from people that have been around him. And everybody tells me that Miles Davis had this impeccable ability to listen.
Yes, I I'm so glad you mentioned him because he is someone I would have thought of, too, as an inspiration, not because I'm musically inclined, although I have a fascination with music. My character Oliver, protagonist of my book, is a musician, and I read Miles Davis's autobiography a few years ago, and it was so amazing. His use of language and his humor and the way he drops the F-bomb in almost every sentence,
Yeah.
but somehow he means it in a different way each
Uh-huh.
time. It's extremely creative. And so that quality in someone that you're talking about when they're so curious and you talk to them and they're totally there, that is something that might be the quality in a person I most deeply admire.
I am furthering that Miles legacy. I have one son, and his name is Miles. So I'm
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
so if you get the chance, I reviewed a book recently by James Kaplan called Three Shades of Blue, and it's an analyzing, it's this overarching analysis of the making of Kind of Blue. And he does it with Miles, Coltrane, and
Mhm.
Bill Evans and takes their lives and kind of contrasts and blends them together to give you kind of an overall view of who they are and kind of where jazz went after such an iconic album. It's worth a read.
I will definitely look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. So let me ask you this. If you can meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, whether it's a writer or anybody else, who would that be? Who would you love to meet and spend time with?
Speaking of musicians, I would love to meet the musician Hosier. Are you familiar with him?
I am not. Sounds a little familiar.
He's Irish.
Okay.
And there was just a report that came out about lyrics and melody in music. I don't know if you heard this, but there was a study of music for the last, since the 1950s, that shows that lyrics have become progressively simpler and more repetitive. And I think of Hosier as someone who's in stark contrast to that.
Yeah.
His lyrics are really like poems. He's like Yeats or Seamus Heaney with a guitar. Um, Not all of his work, but a lot of it. Like there are certain songs, "Swan Upon Leda," which comes it's inspired by a Yeats poem. Um, "Unknown Nth" is another one. "De Selby," "The Flood," "Shrike." He has these amazing songs that can stand as poems, and yet musically they're beautiful. And I saw him live in concert, and he has the reason I love to talk to him is well, first of all, I have this character who's a musician and also envies Hosier. He's mentioned in the book actually, um, but he has this blend of he seems like a genuinely very kind and conscious person, but he's also very fierce. Like you see it on stage, he's very fierce about his work. And I think that blend really produces amazing art. So I'd
Yeah.
love to have a chat with Hosier.
Yeah, yeah. So as a music fan, what was the first live show that you ever saw that absolutely blew you away?
I'm not actually a big concert goer. It took
Okay.
me a lot to go to Hosier because I'm a writer, I'm an introvert, big groups of people. I did see Dylan many years ago when I was a young person, and that
Okay.
was very inspiring. But that's about it from my concert experience.
Okay. I did see Bob in the 90s, actually, the late 90s. They used to have something called the Spirit Fest in Kansas City. They don't have it anymore, and it was up by Liberty Memorial. But this was at a time in his life where the live shows weren't that spectacular. He was just a little bit, I don't know, maybe the voice was slipping a little bit. He wasn't as quite didn't have the fire as usual, but it was still, I loved it. I just couldn't believe that I saw the icon with my own
Hmm.
eyes. So it was
Yeah.
pretty enchanting, you
And he's
know.
another one whose lyrics are poetry.
Yeah. That when I was really getting into music in my 20s especially, that's the only way that I saw songs and lyrics was that they were poetry. And good
Hmm.
friends of mine had a successful band and they almost made it big. And they actually, in the very, very beginning, took a couple of my poems that I was writing. And I remember one called The Heart of My Lollipop, and they took that and they made it into a song. And and that was just what I always thought was synonymous with music was that it was really a poem and it was adapted with lyrics and bridges and all of the things that go into making a song.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's such an interesting process. What comes first?
yeah.
I don't really know very much about it, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, it totally is. It's one of those things in my life because I write, I paint, I do all
Mm,
these things. It's the
mm.
one thing I want to remain a mystery. I really don't know an instrument, so I'm just going to spin the music and just sit back and watch the universe expand and not get too close other than being just a casual observer.
Yeah. And I love the cross-pollination of the arts, the music. And is that painting yours behind you?
Yeah, that's one of
Yeah.
mine I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
cross-training to be involved in all these different arts.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. What is your motivation to make these worlds, to write all of these words, and to even teach when you did? What was the collective motivation for you to do all of this and to also evolve as a human being? What is that for you?
I think those are linked, actually. The evolution as a human being and art are one and the same, I think, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
So when I write, I'm really pursuing my own questions. I'm trying to figure out what I can't understand, about characters who have gone through whatever they've gone through and how do they navigate it? How do they interact with each other? How are they honest with themselves or not? And so it's pursuing these questions that has been my motivation. And if my pursuit of my questions in the form of art is useful to other people, then that's kind of a bonus.
So I kind of have a contemporary modern question about creation. The other day, one of my guilty pleasures in life is I love going to the Dollar Tree and they have the book bin. And I find wonderful books, and I don't know why they're there. Like they're
Hmm.
new books. Maybe there was overstock. I don't know what it is, but I picked up a
Yeah.
book the other day and it was a children's book, but it was written really well. And there was
Hmm.
all these illustrations. And there was this allusion to this kind of like dark fog that was coming in and kind of cloud everybody up and it would disperse people. And there was this man with his dog and he was very lonely. And he gets to the end and he realizes how much he missed people. And it was a metaphor for COVID, but the guy didn't mention COVID at all. And
Hmm.
it makes me think in this modern era of what we're living through, all of these Dylan moments that we're going through right now. And right now
Hmm.
is a very, I mean, just politically in the last month, it's been insane.
Yes.
Do you find the role of writers and artists being more important now, more essential to the mental health of us as human beings than ever before?
I think I can only answer for me personally, but I would say absolutely that art is although, I'm very spiritually involved. I have a meditation podcast and I've followed many spiritual teachers, and that's very important to me. But truth in its starkest terms often comes to me most clearly through art, through fiction, through music. It's just very pure. So I think, yes, I love the story of that children's book and how he doesn't mention COVID, but he gets to the essence of it.
Yeah.
It's a universal experience.
And it's there's a timelessness to it. It's like listening to the White Album. Like if you were to grab like a kid that didn't really listen to music and kind of played a mosaic of sounds that we're used to in this 20th century that are big, you might think that someone just created that album. And that's what I like about this book is that it's not alluding to it, but it
Hmm.
certainly has that pall in the air because we lived through it. And I think that's great because future generations can affix whatever to it, whether it was the Spanish flu or it was post 9/11. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's that
Yes.
idea.
Right. Those it fits into many of those big collective experiences and the personal experiences of
Yeah.
isolation or whatever comes
And
into our
I
lives.
and I think that's the thing that's interesting about life is that at the end of the day, it's not the main thing, but artists want a level of immortality. I think that's because we know we're on a finite plane here. But
Hmm.
if you can leave something behind that will successively get passed down and move and motivate people, the rest of the generations that are on this planet, that's a pretty comforting idea, I would think.
Yes. And I think what tends to last and get passed down is the art that feels channeled. It
Yeah.
feels like it's greater than the person that came through it,
Yeah.
that it came
Absolutely.
through. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
That's a very tough question for me to answer because it's so broad, but I can answer. It might be more helpful if I give a really specific piece of advice that I got about writing that might be applicable, actually, probably applicable to music as well. But I had a teacher in my MFA program, Amy Hempel, who is a master short story writer. And she taught me or advised me to notice the real estate within a sentence and to notice it, particularly the last word, how the value or the weight of the last word is different than the other words in the sentence. And then more so at the end of a paragraph, and of course, the end of a chapter or the book itself. And to really pay attention to not just to not put a throwaway word in there in that spot, to put a word of import, but also to hear the musicality of it,
Yeah.
to notice the sound of the sentence and the click that you're ending on. So as a writer, that advice to me has stuck with me over the years.
The one thing
I
that
wonder
I've
if there's a
done,
musical application too. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
of course, no, there's definitely an economy, that poetic idea of the economy of words to have the most impact, which is, I think, why it's such an alluring art form. But I personally have, um, I started writing haiku probably about 2 or 3 years ago, just
Mm,
to kind of expand on that notion. And I've consistently done it. And I think when you do things like that, where you have to be really careful about syllables and words and what you're doing, you really put your feet to the fire.
yes, and the compression and the constraint actually fosters the creativity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like the original Twitter, it's the original way.
The haiku, yes.
Yeah. So of all of these things that you've accomplished in your life up to this point, what are you the proudest of?
I'd say that I'm the proudest of my commitment to continuing to grow. I feel, particularly as a writer, I have never rested on my laurels or what I've done previously. I've tried to keep growing. I did an MFA program. I taught creative writing for many years, but I continue to take classes, read books, learn from people who I really respect, and just keep trying to get better. I think I have evolved as a writer over the years, and so I'm proud of, I guess, as a person and a writer, just trying to continue to be open to what I don't yet understand or have not yet grasped.
Well, it's interesting getting back to Miles Davis. That's really what he did with his career. That was the hallmark of his
Mm,
musical existence. I mean, I think he even got to a point where he didn't play a lot of the bebop, a lot of that mid 50s, all of the music that we absolutely loved and remember him for because he wanted to move on and evolve. And that was the hallmark, I think, as a creative force on this planet. He always showed us that there's another place to go to and don't just stay in one train station, move on down the line.
yes, and you see that in the great visual artists too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great thing. So let's say you have a dream tonight and you run into that version of you right before you became a teacher and went down this path to become a writer. And you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained. What advice would you impart on that young version? And do you think that version of you would listen?
I would say to my younger self to try to let go of useless anxiety. I had so much anxiety as a young woman and people pleasing and trying to do the right thing. And oh, it's just so much wasted energy. I wish that I could tell that young woman to just be yourself, be free, really pursue what your own passion is. Who cares if it fits with your time and place in the world? I don't know if she would listen, but I would hope she would.
But I've always thought, I remember in my 20s when I was a writer, I was like, I don't know if my story's ready to be out into the world, if I've been around long enough. And I think with some of those examples, you literally have to be on this planet long enough to realize it's not really that important what other people think. It's you don't have to feel anxious about it because I don't know. I think you just have to be here for a certain amount of time. Like I see young people going through that, and I'm like, you just have to. There's got to be a part of you that figures it out. You know?
Yes, that's certainly been true for me. It's just taken age and experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, as the architect of the words and stories you put out there and everything that you've done in your life, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think it's a fascinating question because our experience of ourselves is more intimate than any experience we can have of anyone else or other people have of us. Um, I think for me, when I go to sleep at night, it's as if I am um, letting go of my idea of myself. So this particular person, this with a name and an age and a gender, and I just sort of drop into pure essence, I guess you would say. And so what that looks like for me is a person standing on a cliff over the ocean with wind in my hair and hearing the waves and just experiencing the pure beauty and power of the planet and feeling the interconnectedness of all things. I think at my core, that's who I am and see myself as. Um, and then I wake up in the morning and put back this suit and this name,
Yeah, that's a
go
great
about my
visual.
business.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Of everything that you've put out there, what's been one of your favorite fan letters?
After I published my first novel, April and Oliver, I got a message from a reader. She said that the book had inspired her to become a writer or try to write. She went on to become a best-selling New York Times author,
Wow.
Tarrant Fisher,
Wow.
and she has kept in touch with me for years, poking me, when's your next book, Tess? And on tour recently, she was asked what was one of her most surreal moments as a writer. And she said, well, it's the moment when the person who taught me to write, which is she's referring to me, I didn't really teach her to write, asked me to blurb her book, which I did. I asked Taryn to blurb Dawnland that's coming out soon.
Yeah.
And so that was very meaningful to me, um, to have her words on my book and really to have her encouragement all these years and then to see her blossom as a fantastically successful writer in her own right. So that's been a great experience.
I don't know that there's a higher peak as a creator than to get to that point, like even with musicians, the ones that they emulate and finally get to be on stage with them. There's something magical about that that I don't, it almost seems like a pinnacle. Like you can't get any higher than that because it truly is the circle of life
Yes.
in a
Yeah.
wonderful way. So if anyone wants to get your books, they want to reach out, they want to learn, they want to listen to your podcast, any of the good business in your world, where is the best place to go?
My website, tesscallahan.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook under my name. But my website is probably the best place to find everything in one stop shopping.
Okay, I love it. Tess, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your story, for your time. It's been so illuminating.
Thank you, Joe. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Yes,
And
thank you.
good luck
Take care.
with your own painting, writing, everything,
I
music.
appreciate it. Yeah, we just
Okay.
got to keep on creating.
Yes.
Thank
Thanks.
you.